It's gonna be fresh.
Hi, I'm Josh Rains, and this is Fresh Stories. And you guys have asked for this. I have Mark Robison back with me to talk about Kingdom Innovation. Mark, thank you for being with me.
Hey, Josh, always good to be with you.
The first time was so much fun.
Yeah.
And as we were talking about creativity and innovation and leadership, we got a lot of feedback from that podcast.
Good.
Wanting us to go deeper on what it could look like. And in true Josh fashion, I did not warn you of any of these questions.
Nope. Bring it on, baby.
Bring it on. And so one of the questions is like, how do you draw out innovation in your team? Like as a leader, what can you do? Can you create a conducive environment? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's important to remember that not everybody is innovative, right? If the whole world was innovative, all the people were, we wouldn't get things done.
Yeah.
And so part of that is knowing where to pull it out of and where not to pull it out of. More what I strive for is helping people catch the vision or catch the dream. And I was told that back in college days that you can't dream what you don't know. And that sounds so strange because it's like, well, how can you dream if you already know it?
Yeah.
But the truth is, you can't dream what you don't know, meaning you have to have a seed of truth in it. And then you can begin to see off of that where you might be able to go. So as a visionary, one of the jobs that we have to do is we have to recognize first that we don't look at the world the same. And I know that people say that, but the reason we don't look at it the same is I don't look at what we can do today and what we can't do today.
Yeah.
I assume what we're going to be doing 5 years out, that we've already accomplished it. We figured out those roads through there, right? We got through the problems and are already on that other side. Now I'm looking from there, where do I go for 5 years out? Well, that's one of the problems with vision is that I'm looking out here and my team's back here saying, wait, we can't even do this.
Yeah.
And they're right, we can't, but I'm confident we will figure that out. And once we figure that out, then what do we do? And so some people are saying, well, let's not talk about that till we figure this out. And I'm saying, once you figure that out, it's too late to figure out where you want to be because you're already there. And so being an innovator, being a visionary, what you have to do is you have to back up and recognize you have all those personalities around you. And you need all those personalities. So as you begin to cast a vision, you need to be casting seeds first so that they can begin to dream what they can see. And when they can begin to see pieces, then they can begin to see the pathway over the problem and then through the other side.
Okay. No.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Because like I've always been told, like if you have an idea of a vision, Josh, sometimes if you give it all of them, they can choke.
Right. Exactly right.
Right? They can be paralyzed, but you have to go chunk by chunk. But that takes intentionality and awareness of your team, right?
Exactly. And who you're working with. So I have some of my team that I can drop a couple crumbs and they're right there with me. They've jumped the problem there. Oh, I see where you're headed. And then what if we do these three things too? Hey, that's great. And then we can begin to blend it. And I have others that I'm sitting there and I'm dropping 10 or 12 crumbs and they're getting to the point where, okay, fine, I trust we can get through this problem.
Yeah.
I'll start to look at the other side. And that's okay. That doesn't mean they're less capable, less valuable, or less important. The truth is, they're just as important because they're the ones that will get me through the problem.
Right.
And that's innovation too. It's not like, oh, we're just going to go buy another key and unlock the door.
Yeah.
No, we have to create a key that fits this kind of a function and do that. And that's what they're going to be the greatest at doing. And so it's looking at each of those and allowing each of them to be honored and respected as we walk this path.
Yeah, I remember, Mark, you and I've had several conversations about leadership privately. And I remember one of the things you told me, like one of the main components of your job is relationships. And I think it's so easy for us when God gives us a vision to go straight ahead and you realize you're just dragging your team and you're bumping. Like that takes a lot of self-control because we're kind of wired to advance. So how did that realization come to you to like that pace? Like I guess that control your pace in a way.
Yeah, it is very, very important to get that pace right. And then I'm sure I blow it all the time. Yeah. But I have a rhythm that I walk through. And so the words that I use is when I'm launching the main vision, and I, meaning our team. Okay, so I use my name, but please don't think I do it all. That's not what I don't believe that.
Yeah.
But when we launch that main vision, what we're really doing is we're doing a transformational change. When you've gone through a transformational change, and that can take 5 to 7 years, the next vision can't be transformative. It has to be incremental.
Yeah.
It's still a 3-year run, but it has to be incremental. And that incremental can be advancement. It could also be resetting your foundations.
Yeah.
Because you've made a transformation, you stepped onto a new foundation, but it can have shaky edges. And so you might need to firm those things up. And so it's finding that big move and then settling in, resetting, finding your footing, making sure it's there as you prepare for the next big move. Because we're going main rock, if we're crossing this lake, it's huge rock to huge rock, but there's times when you got to pause on that rock and make sure the rock is stable before we jump to the next big rock.
100%, because I think sometimes like a team could look at that like, man, we're slowing Mark down.
Exactly.
We're slowing this person down. And if you flip the camera, it's like, no, you're not slowing me down. You're actually helping. Because like you said, if you're moving too fast and the foundation's not firm enough, that vision can fail right then and there. And so it is this, it's this interesting push and pull that you have. It's this dance, right? And you're dancing with several different people and you're explaining the vision that God has given and they're in their input. So as a leader, we have to be open. As kingdom leadership, we have to be open to other perspectives and camera angles and knowing that maybe God gave you this vision, but not for you to be closed off with it, but for you to give it to the people and then for them to be so creative inside that vision and show the different avenues.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the reality is my job as a visionary is, that sounds so arrogant, right? My job as a leader is to be the vision, to bring the vision forward. But I can only bring so much of that vision and it's only going to be so transformative.
Yeah.
But when I bring it forward in a place where then the others can begin to cut, paste, twist, grow, massage it, it's a broader, it's deeper, and it's more viable vision.
Yeah.
And so you have to do that. And that's hard for some people to be able to lay it. That's my baby.
Absolutely.
But you've got to do that. I'll give you an example. When we launched our payroll company, this was about 10 years ago, right? We launched it from scratch. And the idea was there. And so I brought it to the team. I'm an accountant. And so I saw the pain inside churches and not-for-profits as they're trying to do payroll. And they think, well, you know, Aunt Margaret can do it for free, therefore it's a good way to do it. And I'm looking at it and saying, do you realize when the federal government says there's over $1 billion of unpaid payroll taxes sitting inside the ministries because they're doing it wrong, is that okay? Because at some point they're not going to be the kinder and gentler IRS, right? They're going to step in. And so I shared this thought with my team, and the team looked at it, and we began to go forward with it. But what we had to do was we had to say, Mark's not running it. Because what I wanted to do, I had aimed it over here.
Yeah.
And that was a great way to start. But in the end, it had to be over here. And so I was making this very quick right-hand turn. And the team's like, no, you've got to bring it and bank it across, because it's the only way we're going to be able to make it sustainable. And so we brought in different people to step up and run that organization. Well, now it's the largest payroll provider for Christian ministries in the country, right? And in a 10-year span. I could get the idea there, and I could see where I wanted it to be, but I had to have a team that paved the road that actually got it there, because my way would have lost too many people along the way.
Right. And we get stuck. So I'm thinking about the character it takes to do that, right? It's humility, right? And like in that moment, that's what showed like, hey, Mark, fantastic idea. We love it, but you can't run with this.
Right.
And like, I think sometimes when God drops an idea or drops a thought, we decide we can control it because he gave it to us.
Exactly right.
But honestly, he lent it to us for us to steward. It was never to control.
Right.
And so you're stewarding among the people that God has given you, which kind of goes to the next thing is like trusting your people to do the job that you hired them to do.
That's right. And get out of the way. Right. That's the beauty of this thing. I've worked for some micromanagers in the past, and they're very difficult to work for, especially for somebody like me, where I'm really good at everything, right? But I have skill sets, and I can. And so when I'm sitting under a micromanager, neither of us are really happy, because they're holding me down, and I can't do what they really want. And when I manage and step away and allow them to do it, I'm never going to be happy with the pathway they chose.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't the way I would have done it. But the end result, I can still be very happy with.
Yeah.
And that's that trust. And so it is finding the right people to be on your team.
Yeah.
Certainly. But it's also backing up and giving them some room to grow.
Absolutely.
And most people rise to the occasion.
Yeah,
And
man.
so that fear of it going wrong is usually unjustified.
Yeah, yeah. I use, honestly, your team. I was at Brother for 4 to 5 years. And so I've kind of seen the inner workings of how the team operates. And what I love is that the flaws of one are the strengths of another.
That's exactly right.
And the awareness it takes to know where your flaws are and to be okay with hiring somebody
Yep.
that can complement that is incredible. And I think when you talk about innovation, kingdom innovation, there's a part of self-awareness. And there's a part of that kind of laying at the altar in front of God, like, God, what do I need? Who do I need? Because God's taught to be in community together, right? We're all built to work together. There's no difference in the marketplace. And so, like, that takes a lot of awareness to do.
It does. And it's first sizing yourself up.
Yep.
And being honest. And you called it humility. I call it pride. Right? Because it's my pride that gets in the way.
Yeah.
It's not I'm a humble guy. It's I'm prideful and I want to step in and say I can do it all. And so it's having to put that under control and saying, okay, what are we really trying to do? Are we trying to accomplish this so Mark is lifted up? And I can say, see what I did? Look at that payroll company. Look what we did. No, that's not what it's about. It's about serving, what are we, 7,000 customers doing their payroll for them today that they didn't have to do and take time away from ministry. And those 7,000 are doing it correctly. So the IRS isn't coming after them in the future. It's looking at that and saying, what's our end goal here? And when you can cast that part of the vision, not the vision of what we want to get accomplished, but why we want to accomplish it. Now you start to see the team members rise up and step in, and then you can begin to say, well, these skill sets work well together. And then trust others.
Absolutely.
The ones that are really good in the weeds, they know who else is really good in the weeds.
Correct.
And so letting them pull some team members in. And so it's being able to identify that gifting and those skill sets accordingly.
So what's needed in that, right? Identify the skill sets. You have to have an environment that has some type of grace, some type of trust, some type of love. And I would say the same thing goes with creativity. I know I've worked with tons of creatives. If they feel like their creativity is being unnoticed or pushed aside, they're not going to be creative for you anymore. Right? They're not going to continue to think that way. And so, like, I think sometimes kingdom leadership is actually kingdom facilitating, right? So what does that look like? What is that environment? How can you even create that environment for that to occur?
Yeah. I don't know if this answers your question the way you want it, but I learned that the statement, failure is okay, is baloney.
Okay.
Failure is the biggest mistake that can happen. Why did we even get to failure? When we're working at a team and we're listening to each other, we should never fail because we're hearing each other. And we have the freedom and the openness to say, Josh, tell me if we're aiming in the wrong direction. And together, why would we have failed?
Wow.
Why couldn't we have seen the failure coming at us early enough to make a decision to change? Now, I'm not saying that we don't stop projects. But to get into a project and have the project fail means that we didn't listen to each other. And I think that's the bigger issue that we face. And so I know someone in my team hate that statement that failure is not an option here. It's not an option. There's no reason for it. Because we should be walking side by side, listening to one another, walking together to make sure this project steers in a way that's going to be successful.
Yeah. Okay. So when you've seen that happen, right? When you see it, what does that look like? Describe to him what does that look like as far as like the allowing a person to speak into it? Like how did that conversation even go?
Yeah. So good ways and bad ways. I'll give you an example. We were rolling out a brand new initiative that came out of our vision plan, and I was passionate about it. And so I said, look, this is why I see this happening, and this is what I want to see accomplished for the benefit of the church. We can do this. And so I don't know, 3-4 months later, I'm getting an update from the individual that's leading the project. And he said, Mark, we were able to do this, and this is what we're going to do. And I looked at him, I'm like, why are we doing that? And he said, because you told us to. And I said, but don't you see where this is going and how it's going to be a downfall on us? And he's thinking, flavor of the day, Robison, what are you doing? You're changing the idea.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I haven't changed. I still want to do this. But what you're paving isn't a path that brings fruit.
Wow.
We got to move it over to here and there. And he goes, well, I know that. And I said, then bring that out. Be willing to tell us how this needs to change. Well, he knew how it really ought to go, but he was still under the mindset that, no, this is what Mark said it needed to be. And that's where you fail, is that he's walking this path, not even blindly. He knows it's wrong. But because Mark said that's the direction. But when they did the analysis, and I had heard the outcome of the analysis saying, no, we should go this direction with it. And he's still paving this pathway. That's when it falls apart. So it's letting the team analyze where you're headed and come back and say, this is what we think needs to happen. And sometimes I disagree. I say, nope, this is still the path I want to be on. And I force additional information to be pulled together, additional research, or I make them go a little bit further because I think maybe they're afraid they can't get through this problem, and therefore they're going to go around another way. But I believe we can get through that problem. So it can be any one of those ways that can cause the thing. So sometimes it's open communication. Sometimes it's pushing them a little bit deeper. But when I'm pushing them a little deeper, I'm watching much closer than what I was when I handed it off too, right? Because I want to know were they right and I was wrong? Because I'm not going to fail in this. I might go a little bit further, but I still have a solution around.
What are the consequences of having an echo chamber? What are some of the things that I feel like I see a lot of that, right? A lot of sometimes like the visionary leaders, for a lack of a better phrase, want their ego stroked. And so they'd rather have you say yes than to combat where they're going. Failure is one of them. Distrust. Like, I just see it going the wrong way. So how can we prevent that from happening? What is something you would tell someone right now when you saw that problem, you see that issue of them like, no, you want yes people. Why do you think they want yes people? Like, what's an opinion that you've seen before in the past? Like, where do you see that in?
Well, it's usually out of insecurity.
Okay.
Right? I mean, if we're afraid that we're going to be found out, we're not capable of being the CEO or the leader in this role, then we can't let people come up with things that tell us what we already believe.
Yeah.
And so we're not going to listen to that. We're going to say, nope, we're going to do this. We're going to push through it. And there are really successful leaders that do that. And you can name some of the top leaders in the country today that we could raise our hand and say, yep, we know so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so running some of the largest companies in the world. But I wouldn't work for them. That's not the kind of lifestyle I want, and I don't want to support that. And I don't need to be run over or yelled at all the time. That doesn't fit for me either. So, but I think that ego, it can be anything, right? It's just the people we walk around with, and they're in our circles of influence, and so we need to prove to them we're in charge, and we want people to show that out.
So I love this conversation because sometimes we think the number one, right, the CEO, whatever, is more valuable than the number 2, number 3, number 4. But in this new environment that we're creating today, that we're talking about, everyone has the same value because we all need each other, right? Not everyone can be a visionary, right? And there's the cons of being a visionary that this person has. So how do you communicate that value to someone for them to know, like, man, number 2 is just as good, right? The next generation, there's a lot of entrepreneurs. A lot of people want to be the number 1.
Exactly.
The number one. How do we communicate that the number 2 is just as important?
Yeah, well, I think that you hit it on the head, right? This generation's coming out and say, I want to be my own boss. Why do you want to be your own boss? Really look at it. Why do you want to be your own boss? Because you don't want people telling you what to do? You don't want to listen to anybody else's opinions? Is that what you think a boss is? Because I have to listen to more opinions because I'm the leader, I'm the CEO, than if I was a manager. My manager has to listen to their 17 direct reports or 10 direct reports. I have 650 employees that all think they have an input into the decision. And so I have to listen to more. So when you're your own boss, you have to listen even more And so do you really want to be your own boss when you think about that?
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And so I think that's part of it. And I forget what the question was.
Yeah, so no, like
Sorry.
that's perfect. So what's the encouragement you give them that it's okay to work for someone?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you got to go back to scripture in that for me. And that's, we're part of a body. And so if we're all the head, we get nothing done.
Yeah.
We have brilliant ideas, but we get nothing done because we still need the hands and the feet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then we need the ears to hear what our customers are saying. And we need the nose to understand whether it smells like this is really going to work or if we're standing in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And so those are all important. And I think that's the part that we keep coming back to. And it's a matter of how you demonstrate it.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to walk that way. You can't just say people, hey, everybody's important around here. Or you're on the highway, you see the truck, and our drivers are our most important asset. And then you look at the vehicle.
Right.
And you're saying that's how you treat your most important asset? Right. And so I've never met a human that is that dumb.
Yeah.
That I can use lip service and yet my actions don't show it and they believe my lip service.
Yeah.
So you have to do those things. You have to take care of the employees. You have to listen to the employees. You have to give them. But honestly, there are some employees I'm not interested in their input on this issue because they don't have the background in it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I've got the privilege of having 11 VPs and senior vice presidents sitting underneath me, all sharing the opinion on this topic. So when an employee in a different department has an opinion on that, it's okay to share it. But remember, I've had all of this input. You haven't had any of it.
Yeah.
So if I don't take your word and say, oh yeah, that's what we have to do. No, I still think this is the right answer. Remember, I've got a lot of additional awareness on that topic that you may not have. And so be careful when you throw out your ideas that they aren't listened to because we're just arrogant fools at the top. No, we have different information that you don't always have.
Yeah. And I'm privy to this information because I know you, I've talked to you about this. And we talk about these ideas, right? We talk about God gives you an idea.
Yep.
And so I kind of want to break that down practically, right? I'll give you an example when you told me. Sometimes you're on an airplane, right?
Yeah.
And you're on your notes, so you're just typing things down in your email. What are opportunities for ideas to come to you? Like, how do you create those spaces in a busy world, right? In a busy world, you're hustling and bustling. How do you create space for the ideas to come? What does that look like in your life?
You know, it's fascinating because it comes all sorts of ways, but I think it's being open to them and being prepped for them.
Okay.
So I'll take an example. I was struggling to launch our Kingdom Advancing Grant Program. I didn't even know what that was. I was trying to find a way that we could have a tighter relationship with our customer base, our key customers, our largest customers, I should say, so we could gain information from them and build deeper relationships with them. That's Saddleback, Bethel, Bellevue Baptist, all these, Willow Creek, all these large churches around the country. Here in town, Pathway, the Chapel, Blackhawk Christian, all those are our customers. And I wanted a way to do that, but state regulations restrict us from hosting events and bringing them in because it can look like we're paying and inducing them to be a customer.
Gotcha.
And that's illegal. So I'm struggling with it. And I've been struggling with it for a couple of years. Believe it or not, I'm driving in the office listening to Star 88.3.
Hey!
And you had a public service announcement.
Okay.
That you made a statement, and you were talking about this wonderful grant that one of the foundations gave to a local ministry, and they gave $5,000. And you went off on how exciting and impactful $5,000 was. And I'm thinking, $5,000, really? It's going to change the world? It does for some.
Yeah.
But we're trying to do, I'm thinking $5,000 doesn't move my church from here to here.
Yeah.
And so but I realized, what if we used our customers to help give away money? And it doesn't have to be $1 million, but what if we gave $50,000 to a local church somewhere in the country on an innovative ministry idea? And then we had our largest customers come together to help us stream and read through the applications to pick the winners.
Yeah.
And then go forward from there, not only give money to that local church, but our customers then step alongside and mentor them. And this is what I got from a 15-minute drive from my home to the office, listening to a public service announcement on 88.3.
Wow.
I'm open to it. So what do? I ran in there and I implemented the program. No, I didn't. I went straight to my chief counsel and said, Michael, this is our issue. I know we've been trying to come up with, what if we structured something like this?
Wow.
And Michael's like, well, yeah, there's some room for that. He said, I think you've got some boundaries here that we would have to do. And so he began to draw the legal bounds so that the idea began to fit inside where we were trying to do. Then I went to our CFO and I said, Matt, what do you think? And he goes, well, if we can cap the dollars so that we know we're not giving more than X amount, then I think we could do this and make it sustainable so we could do it year in and year out. Then I went to my sales director and said, Dan, how do we make sure we're tied in with our customer base, and who would we pick? And he was like, I would immediately pick these individuals because we want that relationship, but they've already said to us in our conversations they want to be mentors of smaller churches. And so I went through my team.
Yeah.
Then I came together and brought it to our officer meeting and said, here's an idea, where do you think we can go with this? And guess what I did?
What?
I stepped away.
Wow.
And somebody else stepped up and they ran the event.
Wow.
It's now one of our favorite events of the year.
Yeah.
Not only for our customer base, because they're getting some money. I have a spouse of one of my officers that is upset with me because I told her you've been to the last 3 events and you're probably not going to be able to go to the next one because we're going to rotate and let other officers on. No. I've built deep relationships with the spouses of these ministry leaders. I'm still coming.
Wow.
Because it's that impactful. I had one of our senior vice presidents came for the first time, and he posted on Instagram. He posted and said, I have never been in a more impactful environment than this single event in my entire insurance career.
Wow.
Those are the kinds of things that happen. And guess what? I didn't create it. But I was driving from my house to the office and I heard this public service announcement, and the Lord dumped into me a concept of how to overcome it. So being open, being prepped for that. And that's my role. I'm paid to do that. So I don't expect every employee to be sitting there with those things.
Right.
But I do believe that the scripture says that we have the mind of Christ.
Yeah.
And if we have the mind of Christ and we allow the mind of Christ to be active in us, we can have the Lord download ideas, solutions, methods, and insights into how to take us on the next step.
Yeah. And Mark, I love that story. There's a lot in that story right there, right? The letting go, right? The knowing that, man, I'm not the one to put it to fruition. I'm going to go to my brother. The first thing you did was you went to your brother. There are people listening right now. They're like, Mark, we don't have those VPs, right?
Great point.
I could give you an example with you and I. There have been events or things that have come up to you, and I said, Mark, what do you think about this? And you'll give me a different camera angle, left and right. So you can actually have a personal board. I mean, I don't call you a board representative,
that's exactly
Mark,
right.
but I see you as a person like, man, if I have this idea, I know if I go to Mark, he is going to throw different camera. Do you see it this way? What about this? And we've had those conversations where it would start off something like this, and then it'll end up right here, because you would see things from different angles. You can ask people in your life. You don't have to have 11 VPs to do this.
Right.
You can do it with the community God has given you.
Right.
If you come in, drop the pride a little bit, right? Drop, I have it all. You don't. Let's already help you there. You absolutely do not. But God has given you the minds around you to throw those different things. So, Mark, for a person listening currently today, you've done it in your own personal life, done it in others. What do those people look like for you to come up to? Like, what are those people? For me, it was easy. Like, I'll go to Mark. Mark has tons of ideas, right? So, like, what are characteristics of that personal board that someone can look for?
Yeah, well, I think you hit it at the very beginning when we talked about the fact that when you sit in brotherhood and you see someone with a weakness, you also see someone next to him with that same strength.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's being honest about who we are and what are our weaknesses and where are our strengths. And don't just focus on your weaknesses. The bigger impact is if you focus on your strength. If my strength is visioning, I want to be the best visionary there is. If my weakness is awareness of somebody else's feelings, I need to work on that.
Yeah.
But if I spend my whole time on that, I've never improved my visioning. which is my real strength and my gift. And so that I think people mess up is they focus on, well, I got to fix all these weaknesses. And there's a place for that. I think it's called accountability.
Yeah.
And we do need to have accountability partners.
Yep.
And there's a lot of folks like that. But you also need to be deeply tied with those that have that same function or gifting that you have, but are further ahead. So we talked about it last time, right? If we're getting married, what do people tell us? Find a married couple that's more experienced. If you are a radio host, you better have some really strong radio hosts around you
100%.
that can talk to you about that too.
Absolutely.
But then broaden it from there.
Yeah.
And say, okay, what else is there? Okay, so maybe we need some technical people around us that can talk to you. You know, if you continue to improve this equipment, you're going to get better. If you continue to do these kinds of marketing processes to get your show better known, that's important. So it's finding those pieces around you that do that. And that's not hard. If you want to just think about it, in business, those are the standard positions, right? You've got marketing and sales, you've got operations, you've got product, and you got leadership.
Yeah.
And those are your primary functions. Finance, you got finance in there. Those are your primary functions. And as you grow, then you pick up HR, and you pick up IT, and you pick up some of the other pieces. That's your group.
Yeah.
Every company in the United States operates with that function. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. So we talked about kingdom innovation. We talked about kingdom creativity. And we put the words kingdom in front of it, right? For a reason, because you can do that in the faith world.
Absolutely.
I think for the longest time, though, it's always been very traditional. And there's never really been room for creativity, right? My big example all the time, like, I feel like there wasn't a place for me in church because I'm not a pastor.
Right.
You know, I'm not a worship leader. Have you heard me sing, Mark? It's not the best thing.
Yeah.
You know, and so there wasn't room for someone with my entrepreneurial skill set to be creative. And you always hear, we've done it always like this. But what we're putting to you today is God is a creative God. He has it inside of you. So why do you believe this is kind of like a late thing that the faith world is getting to in this innovation creating space?
Yeah. First, can I say I don't agree with you?
Okay.
I think the church has been innovative all centuries long, but it's the same rhythm that I talked to you about earlier, is that I do a transformation, and then I do a reset. Then we do a transformation, then we do a reset. I think the church has gone through that. And right now, we came into COVID, as we were entering into COVID, we were in this, I would say, resetting. We were just resetting. And unfortunately, we were setting some foundations because COVID tore it up.
Yeah.
And now it's all messed up, and we've got to reset some foundations, and then we've got to transform again. And I think the church is stepping in there. And so that's one of the things that I love about our Kingdom Advancing Amp program. When I bring those leaders from around the country, Brooklyn Tabernacle sitting there, and they're telling us what they're starting to see in New York City, and I'm hearing what's going on in Phoenix, Arizona, and you start to hear these messages that God is doing church differently.
Yeah.
That's when I know that we're making this big step again. And so I believe it's there. And ours is a 5-year, 3-year, 5-year, 3-year. That's sort of our rhythm. The church, it can be 60 years, 20 years, 70 years, 20 years. I mean, it can be whatever. And so I don't know what it is. I've never really studied it, but I believe the church has gone like this over time as well. And so I do think it comes back to that. But I think we're in a place right now, we have to.
Yeah.
I think COVID changed it. And I think what it did is it broke down the concept of church is a weekly meeting in a building somewhere. And the younger generation, I think it was both sides. The older generation said, well, I don't have to go out in the snow then. I can just stream.
Yeah.
And so they gave up community for what they thought was comfort and safety. And you have the young people that are saying, well, I don't need to go either because it's just the same old stuff.
Yeah.
And then by staying home. And so then what you have is you have your largest givers and your up and coming givers no longer attending on a regular basis, but maybe once or twice a month.
Yeah.
And so they're not tithing as much either. And so the church is now struggling. They don't have the people, but they still have the staff because those folks come, they just come at different times. And so I can't really get rid of my staff, but they don't have the same funding process. And so they have to do it differently. And that's changing things. And I think one of the things that I see is the church changing to be more focused on issues and problems, not on the meeting. And so you've got some churches that are highly focused on homelessness. You have some churches that are highly focused on single parenting. You have some that are focused on sex trafficking. And those things are drawing the younger people back in, not because of just the issue. I think that's where people are failing in this concept of thinking this is a failure. No, they're coming in to take the gospel to that community. And I think that church needs to step back up in a lot of those areas. And so seeing that take place again, I think is going to be a significant change and transformation going forward.
Thank you so much for listening. This podcast episode is powered by Windows, Doors, and More. It's gonna be fresh.